The Venezuelan government has announced that it will request the support for the international community to enable communication mechanism with the Colombian government in order to coordinate border issues. According to the Health Ministry, Brazil registered more than 4,000 COVID-19 fatalities in 24 hours for the first time this Tuesday. According to several sources, the talks that kicked off in the Austrian capital this Tuesday, seeking a return to the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, saw positive developments. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. The Venezuelan government has announced that it will request the support for the international community to enable communication mechanisms with the Colombian government in order to coordinate border issues. The announcement was made by the Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza during a briefing in which he referred to the destabilizing acts promoted by irregular armed Colombian groups in the border state of Apure. The diplomat stated that he will appeal to the good offices of the government of Mexico in its capacity as president pro tempore of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States to facilitate communication between Caracas and Bogota. The foreign minister also pointed out that the initiative seeks to consolidate the region as a zone of peace.
I'm going to send a letter with the same terms to the government of President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, to his foreign minister, our brother Marcelo Ebrard, so that the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, with the pro tempore presidency of Mexico this year, may also act and we can have channels of communication and guarantee regional peace. Let us remember that in Havana, in December 2014, the community unanimously agreed on a zone of peace. In today's world, that zone of peace must be preserved.
The Venezuelan foreign minister also stated that he will request the mediation of the United Nations in order to promote communication between the authorities of Caracas and Bogota.
Secretary General, our dear Antonio Guterres, Your Excellency, how many times have we told you, Antonio Guterres, have we asked you? There is a concept in common law that is called back channel or track to diplomacy. Well, a channel that is not the official one, that is informal, to be able to communicate with Colombia so that there is a minimum of coordination between the public forces to tell the Colombian military about this operation that we are going to undertake, which will displace the irregular groups into their territory to capture them. We are going to give them the coordinates. We are going to give them the data. We are going to give them the dates on which we are going to act.
The foreign minister also said that the government will also request the support of the United Nations to deactivate the anti-personnel mines placed in a poor state by regular Colombian armed groups.
Was delivered with a fundamental objective, even though the Bolivarian armed forces has knowledge of these mines, and many of its members were trained in the process of deactivating these mines that are present in Central America. However, there are new technologies, contributions, and protocols. That is why we want this institution dedicated to this issue and financed by governments to be able to advise our armed forces so they can disarm all the mines in the territory, so that no Venezuelan child, no farmer or soldier will be killed by one of these mines.
In Ecuador, several citizens have filed a complaint against presidential candidate Guillermo Lasso for alleged tax fraud. According to the suit filed before the prosecutor's office of Manabí province, the banker and right-wing businessman breached his tax obligations after having declared a lower than true value of his assets in 2016. The text also explains that through this fraud, the presidential runner managed to pay less as a contribution to the reconstruction of the province of Manabí after the damage caused by the earthquake of April 16, 2016. This crime is punishable by a prison sentence of 1 to 7 years, depending on the details of the case. Meanwhile, Lasso is preparing to participate in the second round of the presidential election, which will take place this Sunday, April 11th, when he will face progressive candidate and favorite to win, Andrés Arauz. And staying in Ecuador, the electoral campaign ahead of the presidential runoff to be held on Sunday in its final stage in the midst of a state of emergency in 8 provinces due to the increase in COVID-19 cases. Campaign activities must end on Thursday. After that, a 48-hour electoral silence period begins before Ecuadorians take to the polls. The presidential race is led by the candidate for the Union for Hope coalition, Abbas Araqchi, who is leading by 7 points according to the polls, against right-wing businessman and banker Guillermo Lasso of the Creating Opportunities Party. This Tuesday, the Colombian Attorney General's office began presenting arguments in the hearing to drop the case against former President Álvaro Uribe, accused of witness tampering and fraud. Attorney General Gabriel James presented his arguments and will try to convince Judge Carmen Elena Ortiz to dismiss the investigation against Uribe for alleged witness tampering and fraud in relation to his ties to right-wing paramilitary groups when he was governor of Antioquia between 1995 and 1997. The request to drop the case is based on the grounds that Uribe's conduct and the evidence presented do not have the character of a crime, and others that do cannot be attributed to him as the author or as a participant, according to the Attorney General. Regardless of the outcome, the controversy surrounding the former president is likely to continue, especially in the wake of further scandals regarding vote buying, electoral fraud, and the ongoing and escalating violence in Colombia. In Brazil, indigenous people denounced the complicity of American financier BlackRock in the socio-environmental crimes committed in the Amazon. Indigenous peoples and non-governmental organizations of Brazil denounced in a report this Tuesday the American financial BlackRock and other companies for socio-environmental crimes in the Amazon. According to the research of the Brazilian Articulation of the Indigenous Peoples of Brazil, the companies BlackRock, Citigroup, JP Morgan Chase, Vanguard, Bank of America, and Dimensional Fund Advisors will have a key role in the destruction of the Brazilian jungle. In Peru, activists from minorities that challenge the traditionally dominant political class are broadening the social diversity among the 2,572 candidates for Congress as the country prepares to head to the polls on Sunday.
Suffered firsthand the consequences of inequality, discrimination, violence, corruption, and extractivism. That's why I do politics. We are proposing a gender reform that puts the fight against gender-based violence and all forms of discrimination on the table and at the center of the political debate.
And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away.
En un mundo en constante movimiento, todos los días se generan nuevos sucesos y es necesario conocerlos. Nos preguntamos, ¿qué hay detrás de cada acontecimiento? ¿Cuáles son las consecuencias y cómo nos afectan? Ante estas preguntas, buscaremos poner el punto en la I.
Dot in the I. Saturday, only on teleSUR. Innovation, science, the technological breakthrough and its influence in society.
Viajeros del saber, el futuro está aquí.
Atomy. Monday, only on teleSUR. Every year, thousands of people leave their homeland to reach new horizons. A reality of those people who struggle for their freedom. Know the diverse causes of those who live between borders. Thursdays, only on teleSUR.
Welcome back to From the South. Brazil registered on Tuesday more than 4,000 new deaths due to COVID-19, which represents a new record of fatalities due to the virus in one day. According to data from the National Council of Health Secretaries, CONAS, Brazil surpassed 336,000 fatalities due to COVID-19, after registering new record numbers of deaths amid an increase in the number of virus variants. According to projections by Brazilian scientists, with the health system on the verge of collapse, Brazil could surpass the United States in the total number of fatalities. Likewise, the number of COVID-19 infections in Latin America and the Caribbean amounted to more than 25 million cases, while the number of fatalities already exceeds 801,000. Data provided by the Pan American Health Organization indicates that Brazil is at the top of the list of the highest number of new coronavirus infections in the region. Colombia continues with more than 2 million positive cases and nearly 64,000 fatalities. Argentina is in next place, registering more than 2 million contagions and more than 56,000 deaths from the virus. The president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, during an address with his government team, signed a decree that contemplates a series of economic measures with the objective of protecting workers from the pandemic. Between the announcements that will apply from next 7 April, the extension until September of the prohibition of the enforcement of credit guarantees, new micro and small enterprises will not pay income tax on income earned until 31 December of the current year. Forced evictions are also prohibited to protect the family and economic actors. Similarly, a bonus was approved for 4 million self-employed workers from the first week of April. Residents of Ecuador's capital, Quito, offered their views as they prepare to head to the polls on Sunday, as the second round of the presidential election is held amid an economic crisis worsened by the COVID-19 pandemic.
And everything. Yes, we Ecuadorians are thinking that hopefully the new government that comes in will do something for everyone, especially the vaccine, but it should really be for everyone, as we know the cases of corruption that exist with VIP vaccines. President Rafael Correa left a legacy and we have to follow it, a legacy of work, a legacy of hope, and that is what we Ecuadorians want. That is why this Sunday we are going to vote all Ecuadorians are going to vote for list 1, Andrés Araúz president.
In El Salvador, after more than a year since schools and universities closed their doors due to the pandemic, the gradual return of students to classrooms began on Tuesday. Minister of Education Carla Enania said the return will be gradual, optional and partially attended, meaning parents can decide whether or not to take their children to school. In case of opting to stay at home, the official stated that access to multiple teaching platforms, such as the television, radio, online classes, and the delivery of printed guides will be guaranteed. The minister also stressed that inside the classroom, physical distance will be maintained. As part of the plans, one group of students will attend classes Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, while another will attend classes on Tuesday and Thursdays. Chilean President Sebastián Piñera announced this Tuesday that his government has enacted the law that postpones the elections originally scheduled for April the 10th and 11th for 5 weeks, following a surge in COVID-19 cases. The president has requested Congress support to move, claiming that the intense resurgence of the pandemic in Chile meant the conditions were not appropriate for the vote, which will see the election of mayors, governors, and members of the Constituent Assembly charged with drafting a new constitution. Despite the rapid vaccination process in the country, with more than 7 million people vaccinated, with at least 1 dose, cases have jumped to new daily records. The elections will now take place on May 15th and 16th. In the United States, the western state of California plans to lift most coronavirus restrictions on businesses and workplaces by June 15th. According to Health and Human Services Secretary Mark Ghaly, enough people should be vaccinated by then to allow for life to almost get back to a pre-pandemic normal, although a mask mandate will remain in effect. Health authorities are still cautious and say that California will reopen more widely in mid-June, only if vaccine supply remains sufficient and hospitalization rates remain stable and low. The announcement comes as states across the country have lifted restrictions as most people get vaccinated.
And a audacious goal of providing over 40%.
On Tuesday, several hundred people demonstrated in the Bosnian capital against what they consider to be poor management of the coronavirus pandemic. The country is facing a third wave of COVID-19 and the number of fatalities is rising sharply.
3 months since the beginning of the epidemic, no political party has presented a plan to fight the pandemic. No one can be absolved of responsibility anymore. We don't care which jersey, which party, we demand responsible political leaders. I came to ask for vaccines for my people, the vaccines that we don't have access to because of our government. Nothing has been done since the beginning of the coronavirus epidemic, which was more than a year ago.
The Indian capital on Tuesday imposed an immediate night curfew, a day after the nation posted a record coronavirus surge of over 100,000 new cases reported in 24 hours. Alarm has grown as cases continue to rise, with the country's financial hub, Mumbai, also introducing similar restrictions. The ban will be in place each night from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. through the end of April, with only essential services or people traveling to and from vaccination centers allowed on the streets. After the start of the curfew late Tuesday, shops and street vendors that will usually be open were closed, but there was still a regular amount of night traffic on some roads. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us.
Una travesía para descubrirnos. Buscamos conexiones perdidas.
No nos queda otra que luchar, porque no tenemos nada que perder.
Realmente es por todos.
Recorremos el mundo con reportajes teleSUR.
Saturdays. Only on teleSUR.
为了保持身体健康，我冥想。
Para mantenerme saludable, yo corro.
To keep myself healthy, I study.
Για να διατηρηθώ υγιής, τρέφομαι σωστά.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo bailo.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo purifico mi espíritu a través del cuerpo. ¿Y tú?
Guide your body. Tuesdays, only on teleSUR.
Who's moving the chessmen? What interests motivate the actors behind each event? The board is deployed there. Critical Move investigates every event from Monday to Friday. Only on teleSUR.
Welcome back to From the South. According to several sources, the talks that kicked off in the Austrian capital this Tuesday, seeking a return to the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, saw positive developments. A broad roadmap designed to rescue the deal undermined by the Donald Trump administration's unilateral withdrawal in 2018 has been agreed, with the aim of bringing Iran and the United States back into compliance in as little as 2 months. 2 working groups have been set up to examine the economic sanctions on Iran that the U.S. will need to lift to come back into compliance with the UN Security Council resolutions and the steps Iran will need to take to bring its nuclear program in line with the terms set out in the 2015 deal. Russian ambassador to Vienna, Mikhail Ulyanov, hailed the outcome of the preliminary talks as successful. Political director of the European Union's Foreign Service, Enrique Mora, said the meeting had been constructive, adding there had been unity and ambition for a joint diplomatic process. A further meeting between diplomats is expected on Friday. And the White House press secretary Jem Psaki, referring to the talks aimed at salvaging an international agreement on Iran's nuclear program, noted the process will be difficult and long.
So, look, I would say at this point, today's the first day of discussions. As you know, these discussions are happening in Geneva, and they are happening through our European counterparts and partners. We expect them to have difficult portions. We expect this to be a long process, and we continue to believe that a diplomatic path is the right path forward, and there are benefits to all sides. When the Trump administration pulled out of the joint plan of action, what they left us with is a far decreased visibility of Iran's nuclear capability, of inspections at their sites, of an understanding of how close they were to acquiring a nuclear weapon. That's not in anyone's interest, certainly not the American people.
And also, the top Iranian negotiator and diplomat Abbas Araqchi told Press TV that the United States must lift its anti-Iranian sanctions altogether and in a single step if it truly seeks to rejoin the 2015 nuclear deal, which it abandoned almost 3 years ago.
Has said is in fact a sign of the lack of seriousness in their side, because they have left the JCPOA and they have imposed sanctions. So obviously, if they want to come back, they have lifted all those sanctions all together in one step. That is quite logic, and that is a very reasonable demand by the Islamic Republic of Iran. We only go back to full compliance when the US has lifted all sanctions imposed or reimposed or relabeled after January 2017 and has verified by the Islamic Republic of Iran. Then we would go for full compliance.
This Tuesday, 10 officials were indicted in Iran over the 2020 shutdown of an Ukrainian passenger plane that killed 176 people. Ukrainian International Airlines Flight 732, bound for Kyiv for Tehran, was shut down by 2 missiles shortly after takeoff from the morning of January 8, 2020. The incident sparked huge controversy as Ukraine voiced suspicions that the downing was not accidental. In preliminary reports on the disaster last year, Iranian authorities blame an air defense operator who they say mistook the airplane for a United States cruise missile. At least 157 people died after the passage of tropical cyclone Seroja in Indonesia and East Timor. Indonesian Disaster Management Center reported that at least 130 people died from heavy rains and landslides in the eastern flower territories, Alor, Lembara, Ende, and Bima. The Indonesian government noted that it continues to search for victims as it estimates that at least 70 people remain missing. Executive authorities in East Timor reported the death of 27 people due to the natural phenomenon. Both countries warn of continued rainfalls in the coming hours. Greenland held an early parliamentary election on Tuesday, partially focused on whether the semi-autonomous Danish territory should allow international companies to mine the sparsely populated Arctic island's substantial deposits of rare earth metals. The snap election was called after the center-right Democrats pulled out of the three-party governing coalition in February, leaving the government led by the center-left Forward Party with a minority in the National Assembly. Greenland's outgoing Prime Minister Kim Kielsen pushed to give the green light to the Kivene Fields mine, a project involving uranium and rare earth metals on the south of the island, developed by Greenland Minerals, an Australia-based company with Chinese ownership. In Mozambique, thousands of displaced people have reached safety after a recent attack by insurgents on the coastal town of Palma in the northern Cabo Delgado province. The attacks forced at least 11,000 people to flee Palma, with thousands more reported to be trapped inside the area. Civilians have been arriving in Pemba, Nangande, Mueda and Montepuez by foot, road and boat since March 24th, in the aftermath of the attack on the strategic town, the hub of a giant gas project featuring foreign investment. Humanitarian flights that initially helped to evacuate hundreds have now been suspended, pending further clearance by authorities. 3 years of turmoil in the north of Mozambique has displaced nearly 700,000 within the country, the majority during the past year. Congo's Constitutional Court on Tuesday certified the re-election of President Denis Sassou Nguesso 2 weeks after provisional results gave him a widely expected landslide victory. Rejecting an appeal by the opposition, court president Auguste Iloki said Sassou Nguesso is declared elected with 88.4% of the vote. The March 21st election was boycotted by the main opposition party and overshadowed by the death from COVID-19 of the president's closest rival, Guy Brice Parfait Colelas, who only managed to secure 7.84% of the vote. And we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For Telesur English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.